Good morning. Welcome to the midweek edition of your breakfast show on Leadership Television Inside Nigeria. My name is Unifor Dugbobo, your host on the program. On today's show, we are looking at what these newspapers are saying, including Nigeria's most influential leadership. Let's go there. Let's see what leadership has on its cover this Wednesday, August 20, 2025. Leadership's leading story today says, Amaechi's presidential bid dead on arrival, says Wike, the FCT minister, Barrister Wike. Amaechi's presidential bid dead on arrival, says Wike. And that leading story continues on page 4 of leadership. Let's see some excerpts from that leading story. Minister of the Federal Capital Territory FCT, Nyesom Wike, has declared that his predecessor and political rival, Rotimi Amaechi's presidential ambition, will come to naught, describing it as dead on arrival. According to Wike, if Amaechi runs for president in the 2027 general elections as the candidate of the Coalition African Democratic Congress, ADC, he will fail. Wike made these comments on Tuesday during an appearance on Channels Television's Politics Today program. He dismissed Amaechi's chances of securing a presidential ticket and winning the support of the Nigerian electorate. Amaechi, former Minister of Transportation, who was the runner-up in the All Progressives Congress APC presidential primary won by Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2022, recently defected to the ADC in pursuit of his presidential ticket for the 2027 poll. However, the FCT minister, who served as governor of Rivers State immediately after Amaechi's 8-year tenure, expressed absolute confidence that his predecessor would fail. Excerpts from today's leading story on Leadership newspaper, Amaechi's presidential bid dead on arrival, declares the FCT minister. Still on the cover of Leadership newspaper this Wednesday, we have the timeline of U.S. visa restrictions on Nigerians illustrated on the cover of Leadership just beneath the leading story. U.S. changes non-immigrant visa policy to single entry, 3-month validity visas for most Nigerian citizens July 8, 2025. And of course, July 7, we also had earlier, a day before that, July 8, July 27, 2025. U.S. warns Nigerians will suffer penalties for visa overstays. And in August 18, 2025, U.S. says Nigerian visa applicants must provide social media history for past 5 years. And just yesterday, August 19, 2025, federal government threatens retaliation to protect sovereign rights. Illustrations for the leading story, second leading story on the cover of Leadership. Experts rights group divided as U.S. defends visa rules against Nigerians. That story continues on page 7 of Leadership. We move to the business boss of Leadership, where we have trending story: court freezes Jay's bank accounts linked to Mele Kyari, the SY NNPCL CEO. Court freezes Jay's bank accounts linked to Mele Kyari. And of course, we are taking some excerpts from that business story. It says the Federal High Court in Abuja on Tuesday ordered the temporary freezing of 4 Jay's bank accounts linked to Mr. Mele Kyari, the immediate past group managing director GMD of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, over allegations bordering on fraud. Justice Emeka Winte gave the order after the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC's lawyer, Ogechi Ujam, moved an ex parte motion. Ujam told the court that investigations were ongoing and that the commission would need some time to conclude its findings. Excerpts from the business story on the business boss of Leadership's cover today, this Wednesday. Still on Leadership newspapers, prayers have kept Nigeria together, coming from IBB, that is Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, who just celebrated his birthday. Prayers have kept Nigeria together. Banks raised 2.5 trillion naira ahead of recapitalization deadline, according to a report, and that story is on page 7 of Leadership. Search intensified as 22 still missing in Sokoto boat accident. ASU rejects inclusion in staff support loan scheme. 13 killed inside Katsina Mosque. Of course, this coming just yesterday when the NAF bombed the hideouts of some bandits in the state and, of course, actually succeeded in freeing some kidnapped victims in their hold. And however, maybe obviously in retaliation, the bandits have killed 13 inside Katsina Mosque. We move ahead above the masthead of leadership this Wednesday. Chieftaincy titled Torso Alafin is a comedian coming from Oni's aid, and that story is on page 20 of leadership. And lastly, on the cover of leadership, Ibom Air, NACAB, NCAA means AV SEC cabin crew immersing today. Of course, is also a developing story coming from the issues in the aviation sector recently. NCAA means AV SEC cabin crew immersing today. The story runs on page 4 of leadership newspaper. From the cover, we move ahead to the page 3 today, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on unruly passengers in our airports. Unruly passengers in our airports. And of course, like we normally do, we'll take some excerpts from today's stand. Airports are meant to be disciplined spaces governed by rules, procedures, and professional enforcement. However, recent high-profile incidents in Nigeria's major airports suggest a troubling erosion of these standards. The public spat between Senator Adams Oshomole and Air Peace, Fuji music star Wasiu Ayinde's altercation with ValueJet, the viral footage of a passenger physically assaulting airline staff, and subsequent videos of airline security harassing her on an Ibom Air flight show our psychology that anything goes in Nigeria. It says these events form a pattern where personal entitlement collides with weak institutional capacity to prevent, contain, and penalize disorder. We move towards the conclusion of today's stand, where we have furthermore, swift and proportionate punishment must be paired with corrective measures. Passengers guilty of endangering flights should face prosecution or administrative sanctions. At the same time, those whose misconduct stems from ignorance or misunderstanding should undergo mandatory safety education before being allowed to fly again. Airline security should also show professionalism in handling unruly passengers to avoid the unavoidable and embarrassing incident between the airport security and Ms. Emerson. Airlines should also invest in crew de-escalation training and run public awareness campaigns about passenger responsibilities. Today's stand in leadership newspaper is on unruly passengers in our airports. From today's stand, we move to the back page, where we have, of course, guest column gracing the cover of the back page, where we used to have Olufunke Barowa. However, today's guest columnist is no other person than the governor of Enugu State, and that is Peter Mba. How we are revolutionizing public transport in Enugu State. In quote, we are proving that environmental responsibility and economic growth can complement each other. Today's quote from guest columnist on the back page of leadership, how we are revolutionizing public transport in Enugu State. Before we move up from the back page, we must not fail to visit Ghana Must Go. Report has it that 1 in 4 Nigerian fathers not biological parents. Actually, it was a report that trended yesterday in some of the daily newspapers. And Ghana Must Go replied, no man should take this lying down. Of course, they should take it standing up. It's on that note we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Wednesday. Don't forget to log into the website of Leadership for continuation of those stories. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard's leading story today says U.S. report raises concerns over security justice in Nigeria. U.S. report raises concerns over security justice in Nigeria. Identifies lengthy pre-trial detention delays as major challenges. No 70,000 naira minimum wage has lost value to a falling naira. U.S. government praised us for arresting Ansaru leaders just recently coming from presidency. says issues with judiciary security naira being addressed. Of course, this is a developing story. The U.S. Embassy had it on his website yesterday, a report about Nigeria where he raises concerns over security, justice, and of course, prolonged detention in Nigeria's correctional centers. And of course, in reaction to that, the presidency says the issues with judiciary security naira are being addressed, and that U.S. government actually praised them for arresting Asaru leaders just recently. It was captured yesterday in yesterday's newspapers. And the NHRC, that is National Nigerian Human Rights Commission, says we recorded 331,035 cases of rights violations, 375 killings in July. That story continues on pages 5 and 6 of Vanguard newspaper. The leading story, U.S. report raises concerns over security, justice in Nigeria. We move ahead to other stories gracing the cover of Vanguard newspaper. Owo Catholic Church attackers had links with foreign terrorist groups, DSS tells court. Northwest stakeholders security chiefs rally against banditry. Bandits kill 13 worshippers in Katsina Mosque as army neutralizes 3 kidnappers in Delta shootout, rescues kidnapped lady. That story is on page 26 of Vanguard. Abuja court freezes 4 bank accounts linked to SNNPCL boss Kyari. Vision restored, how Vanguard is changing lives. That story is on page 7 of the paper as it takes us to the stories about the masthead of Vanguard. Ejun Cardoso strengthened fiscal monetary partnership. 2027, Amaechi's presidential bid dead on arrival, coming from Wike. Of course, that's the leading story on leadership today. NBA writes AGF demands release of Osun local government funds. NCAA summons Ibom air cabin crew Emerson for further investigation. It's on that note we conclude review of front headline stories on Vanguard newspaper this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of Vanguard newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is The Punch. The Punch leading stories today says capital projects crumble as states cut spending. Governor cite insecurity, red tape for 2.7 trillion naira capital spending in 6 months amid rising travel wage bills. Capital projects crumble as states cut spending. Governor cite insecurity, red tape for 2.7 trillion naira capital spending in 6 months amid rising travel wage bills. That's leading story continues on page 2 of The Punch. Second leading story today on the Punch newspaper, Texas governors unite to woo foreign investors via new platform. SNNPCL spokesman canvasses tax relief for media houses. Kogi header shoots 11-year-old son dead during grazing. So unfortunate. By-election winners get certificates of return Thursday, coming from INEC. And of course, that takes us to the story just beside the masthead of the Punch newspapers. Yoruba elders weighed in as Alafin Ooni feud escalates. And above the masthead, 2027 showdown, Wike fires shots at Amaechi, Babachi trashes ADC. RMAFC faces backlash over pay rise for political office holders. And lastly, on the cover of The Punch this Wednesday, court blocks SNNPCL boss accounts amid EFCC probe. Don't forget to log into the website of The Punch newspaper for continuation of these headline stories. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is The Nation newspaper. The Nation's leading story says governors lament dismal foreign direct investments. Africa's business interest steadily growing. NGF unveils Investopedia. And secondly, on second leading story says Ejun Cardoso meet to strengthen fiscal monetary policy synergy. FROS CEO in attendance. Nigeria to demand reform of global financial system. We are in Japan to see opportunities, coming from President Bola Tinubu. Wike challenges contractors. NCAA invites Ibom air crew Emerson. And above the masthead of The Nation newspaper, probe of 661 million naira court freezes SNNPCL boss Kyari's accounts. Probe of 661 million naira. Court freezes SNNPCL boss Kyari's accounts. Owo Catholic Church attackers linked to foreign terror group coming from DSS during their arraignment yesterday in the court. Owo Catholic Church attackers linked to foreign terror group. Alafin versus Oni, who blinks first in Royal Rumble? Of course, that you have to find answer to as we conclude review of front headline stories on the Nation newspaper this Wednesday. Don't forget to log into the website of the Nation for continuation of those headline stories. However, we move to the last paper we have on our lineup this Wednesday, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian's leading story says floods, lack of potable water worsen cholera epidemic in 34 states. Floods, lack of potable water worsen cholera epidemic in 34 states. The story continues on page 36 of The Guardian. Of course, they have illustration beside it. We have 2025 outbreak of cholera. 34 states reporting cholera infections. 3,109 suspected cases recorded by end of June 2025. 86 deaths by June 2025. Nigeria ranked as second worst affected country in West and Central Africa. Zamfara State accounts for 32% of all suspected cases. We have water and sanitation infrastructure. Nearly 50% practice open defecation. 179 million Nigerians lack access to safely managed drinking water services. Only 10% of Nigerians have access to safe potable water. 80,000 children at heightened infection risk across West and Central Africa. Cholera outbreak and risk populations. More than 60 cholera beds available across cholera treatment centers in Zamfara states. Up to 50% mortality rate in remote communities or with delayed treatment. 15 million Nigerians at high risk of flooding. These are illustrations for the leading story on The Guardian newspaper this Wednesday. Floods, lack of potable water worsen cholera epidemic in 34 states. Still on The Guardian newspaper, ASU braces for strike as protests rock branches. So call for 172 million subscribers as Tinubu cancels planned 5% telecoms tax. 60% of public school teachers lack basic digital skills, says UBEC. Our church invaders had links with foreign terrorist groups, DSS tells court. Nigerians' minimum wage insufficient to lift citizens out of poverty, coming from the U.S. government. Mixed reactions to implementation of dialysis subsidy months after approval. MPA sports $2 billion funding gap as investor apathy stores deep seaport drive. That business story is on page 15 of The Guardian. And of course, it takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of The Guardian. PDP convention, Wike's camp meets today to take position. NCAA revises phone regulations on domestic flights. And of course, the summation of their meeting is that all phones must be silenced, must be shut down when you are airborne. NBA monarchs urge Tinubu to intervene in withheld Osun local government funds. And that concludes the review of front headline stories on The Guardian newspaper this Wednesday. For more, don't forget to log into the website of The Guardian, www.guardian.ng. So it's on that note we conclude today's Inside Nigeria newspaper review on Leadership Television. Don't forget to join us same time, same station for another fresh edition of the program. My name is Winifred Webo, and don't also forget to join us on this station for news on the hour. Thanks for joining us.
Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.